EPMO not become overhead or be sustained like that, but what value does an EPMO bring to the table? And I think maybe one of the things that could be looked at here, and maybe the group might want to weigh in on this, is what would be the success factors that an EPMO is operating correctly and providing the necessary value. Obviously, you can talk about projects being on budget, on schedule, and within scope. You could talk about getting from red to green, corrective action plans, that type of stuff. But how many projects are coming in on time, on budget? What's the average cost overrun of a project? What is the average schedule changes that occur? I mean, there's a lot of things that I can think of off the top of my head, and I don't know if that's what brings value to folks like you as to whether or not a function is working correctly and providing that necessary value. But I am very much focused on metrics, and as the team here has known, I'm looking at metrics, and I want to, we need the right data. Because data for the sake of data can be used for the wrong reasons, but we need the right data that actually starts showing the value that we're bringing back to the agencies in the enterprise. And hopefully you all heard that and I wasn't talking to myself.
Yeah, I think we can hear that, and I think we're still promoting, I think, a couple. Mr. Tart is still, are you able to unmute? Okay, we're going to get you promoted here.
Good to go.
Okay, great. Thanks for bearing with the
no problem.
delay.
One thing I was going to say is, the IT has a couple challenges. One is it's got a long track record of not being very successful in managing projects. At one point over an 8-year period, we had 64 projects that were exceeded budget by 50% and time frame by 100%. So we have to figure out, we define projects of the scope and size that we can be successful. As Auditor Wood said, being on track and on time and on budget, basic stuff. I think the PMO is super important, but I go back to Jim, your comment. It doesn't need to be a project focus. It needs, and like I think George was talking about maybe, or Tracy, that we need to be a true program management office.
Yes.
It's in desperate need. We've got the other issue you've got to be a challenge on oversight is there's 27 other CIOs in the state, agencies, and each agency, so DHHS, DOT, they all have their own CIOs. So how we coordinate across agencies on the transformation and priorities. I think Tracy, you may have mentioned going to the electronic driver's license. That's been a topic of discussion for at least 6 years, and setting aside and watching Ohio and what they were doing. But picking up projects that we can do in a time frame that is successful. There's no kind of dashboard, both across the other CIOs as well as educating the legislature, who are appropriating a majority of the funds for IT. There's a lot of opportunity for success for you, Jim, and I'm tremendously, just on a personal note, with your background, uber excited to have you here. It will be great.
Thank you, Jeff. And I will tell you that I have already started to see some dashboards from the EPMO functionality, because it's one of the first things I was asking for. So in Washington, as an example, we had a $1.6 billion application portfolio that was being managed. And that was done with complete transparency. The legislature had access to it. The public had access to it. It was public facing off the website. So I think we can get there. Like I said, what I need to understand, and by the way, when you talk about coordination across the other agency CIOs, I think that's already in my statutory environment. Jonathan or others will have to correct me on that at a later time to make sure I'm saying that correctly. But part of it is, I don't want to have hammers. I want carrots and sticks, right? I want to encourage a certain type of outcome. You get to swing a hammer once and you get a lot of debris. And yeah, it's hard to repair the damage after swinging a hammer. That's not what I prefer to do. I prefer to, how do we work? And going back to what we talked about earlier, strategy. Should we do it? right? And that EPMO is part of that whole process, right? What capabilities do we currently have? And doing that business relationship analysis and assessment. Architecture is all about design, right? And I think a lot of things that you all have been talking about deal with architecture. You know, what's the rate of adoption? What's the return on investment? What's the cost factors going to be over the next 5 years of the life cycle? How are we going to measure success? You know, it's a business. Identify what success is. Success is not putting an application in production, right? How do we determine that we're getting the outcomes that we need from that application? And then being able to, again, get the credibility that we're delivering on what we said we would do. And the we in this case is the IT community. It's not just DIT. So those are the kind of things that, you know, I have a lot of ideas and things that we could work on. I also want to recognize the fact that, you know, where the governor is in his term. And, you know, we don't have 5, 6, 7 years to do some of these things. And some of these things are evolutionary. They're going to take a level of maturity and sophistication. Going back to how do we educate our people, right? So people understand the importance of architecture. They understand the importance of business relationship management, portfolio management, as an example, and working differently and engaging our agencies, because we have to understand at an IT level what the business is doing, right? And I'm sure many of you who are in IT fields in your respective area, you understand what the entities are that you're supporting or doing. You're at the table. You're in those conversations. We need to be at those conversations as well. So we're not talking about bits and bytes and widgets. We're talking about business and business value. And understanding when we have a service outage, what is that impact back to the business? So if I have to talk to Secretary Cohen, Secretary Hooks, Secretary Boyette, I can sit there and say, hey, we had this happen and this is the impact to your business. I'm not going to sit there and talk about a VM cluster going down and we lost maybe 30 virtual servers. I want to talk about it in business terms. And as you can see, I'm very passionate about that and very focused on that angle. So really could use your help in what would work here within the in the state of North Carolina in that regard.
But Jim, you'll have a balance because as an example, I believe this to be true, and you may hear a different answer, but across the state, there is no documented enterprise architecture, which absolutely fervently needs to be accomplished because we get fragmented systems that don't talk to each other, which is foundationally a massive problem. But so yes, on the technical, we need to talk about business, but you've got to have the highway in place to drive on.
Yeah. And Jeff, to that point, I'll give you an example. So the Washington Disease Reporting System was basically clobbered because that system was designed to report on positive tests. But as we all know, when COVID came around, we also were reporting out on negative tests. And what was the preponderance of the data? Negative test results. The system imploded. So the thought process was, we'll move it to the cloud. Well, it became 30 applications that went to the cloud because when they actually realized everything that the Washington Disease Reporting System talked to, an entire portfolio of 30 apps had to move to the cloud with it. Instead of a 3 or 4 day project, it became a 3 to 4 month project. And that's because no one understood all the intricacies, like you said, Jeff, of what talks to what needs to be in real time, what can be done asynchronous or whatever the case may be. So very much so. And we are going to work on, I do believe the gentleman who basically oversees architecture here in our agency is working on utilizing a TOGAF framework. And so that's something hopefully that we'll be able to get maybe published and pushed out there, again, as we're moving forward with some of these things. But there's no way we can make a cloud journey if we don't understand what talks to what and how it talks to it.
Anything else on this Enterprise Project Oversight Enhancement Committee that you want to give guidance on as board members?
I want to mention one thing, and it's just more of a reiteration of what Jim just said, and that is portfolio management. So we do look at enterprise projects, and they're all segments of work. But as an institution, as a state institution, we need to look at it as a portfolio. Just this month alone, I've already participated in probably 4 independent CIO to CIO conversations around Salesforce. Each one of those conversations are a project, but no one's talking collectively at how do we tackle, CRM, Salesforce, Dynamic, whatever, that can aid all of us, right? And so I think,
Right.
I would second the portfolio management piece. It's huge.
Mhm. So Keith, I will be talking to the Technology Association, I believe, Tuesday afternoon, and this is going to be one of the themes of the messaging to the supplier community around this. We in Washington had 4 different licensing systems, licensing of professionals. So whether you're a health official, whether or not you were a cosmetologist, a barber, or a certified public accountant, at the end of the day, if you think about the process to license a professional, is it radically different across those 4 sectors of industry? No. Now, there are nuances, and don't mean to sit there and say that the licensing of a cosmetologist is the same as licensing a medical doctor, but focus on the difference. Don't let the tail wag the dog. And that's what we have to stop. Let's embrace the commonality that we have, and let's go address the differences that exist. And that gets us to a different price point, a different scope of work. Obviously, we got to make sure everything intercommunicates, to Jeff's point. But that's the kind of conversation I would like to start having more over the next couple of years here in North Carolina, as much as we can. Also understanding the fact that there could be federal requirements that get thrown down to us from DC or you name it, that we have to respond and react to. And sometimes you can't necessarily go through this wonderful process to get to those outcomes. Sometimes there are things that we're going to have to try to figure out what's the best way of mitigating and making sure that we're not creating a problem downstream with unintended consequences. And so we just got to be open to that discussion as well.
So I'm going to shift us over to the 4th committee here. And Jim, I'm going to ask again, we're calling this digital transformation, and we've captured some of the comments that you shared in your opening remarks. Anything else just in terms of scope or focus that you think are helpful to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, so I would like to hear from all of you. I'm new to the state. I came in on Saturday night, the last day. I think it was sunny. But anyway, you all think about it from the customers you service. And I see State Controller Combs here in the center square with me right here. She's servicing state employees and things of that nature, and has a lot of a back-end ERP system. So all her customers are agencies, but she also has customers outside of state agencies, right? I'm assuming higher education has to come in and utilize a common chart of accounts and different things. When you think about the financial back-end components, I think about many of you that are in the university or the higher education system. How do you interact with your student population and all the services you're providing? And what are you doing very well that seems to work where college kids don't have to necessarily go around 5 different places on campus to get something done? I mean, this is kind of, I kind of think of this as more of a common sense approach, but sometimes bureaucracy and common sense aren't words you can put in the same sentence. And I understand that. So this is kind of where I would like to see what all of you think about. Think about how you interact with government. From filing of taxes, maybe to vehicle registrations, to changing your address, or if you know folks that might be interacting with Health and Human Services, the vaccination process that has been going on as well, and some of the difficulties and challenges that were around scheduling and getting shots in arms in people, and addressing the inequity and equality issues that have existed, and that this state has done a great job of it, admittedly. So that's the kind of thing, as these things come up, what can we be doing better to make it easier for the residents of the state to engage with government?
I think we proposed a 5th pillar, and that is automation. We're a very manual centric state, and although we're making progress in certain areas, automation is going to be a key component of our digital transformation.
And orchestration.
Sorry, say that again.
So when we talk about automation, Keith, though, we really still got to hone in on people and process, because it sounds like to me we have process issues. And if we automate a bad process, we probably just more complicated. So how do we do business? So are you saying that we need to do some business process reengineering maybe, or take a look at it from that lens?
No, I think I don't disagree with you. I think that that is very true. You don't just automate a bad process because it doesn't help.
So we need to
I
have,
think you certainly have a hope for impact would be that business process reengineering. But what I am saying is the implementation of automation. There's a lot of things that are available to us today from a capability perspective. Robotic process engineering or robotic process automation is a good example where you're defining, you go into a particular workflow and you see what is manual, is repetitive, is costly, but is necessary, and you create automation to remove that manual, redundant, low value human process. A good example, and I know this isn't really a perfect example. I don't know it perfectly, but I'm a consumer of it. And that is when I go in to renew my state registration every year, it's been drastically improved by having, chatbot and machine learning automation capability that just says, hey, plug in these few things. I see that you want to renew your own registration. Within 4 minutes, I'm done, I'm gone, and I don't have to talk to the registry for another year. There's a lot of opportunity, and I see that from my agency, but I also see it with other CIOs looking at their space. We're all trying to do more every day because the world around us is changing, but we're not getting budgets to offset more human capital or whatever. And the way you're going to do this is you're going to look at some of these processes that are done by humans and you're going to automate them.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that, and fully concur. So let me maybe phrase the question a little bit differently. And Dr. DeCento and I kind of had this conversation earlier this week. Do we understand who and what is engaging us from a state government aspect? So do we understand the personas that are out there? And when I was talking with Dr. DeCento earlier, I was telling him about some efforts that we had done in Pennsylvania where there was it's called human-centric designers, a really cool technical word that I would probably mispronunciate and embarrass myself for not being able to say it. But anyway, what it was we had a firm go out and basically across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania interview around 350 to 500 people to get an idea of who, what, and how were people accessing us. And what we found out in Pennsylvania was that the number one use case, if you will, or persona was a son and daughter returning back to Pennsylvania to take care of aging parents. And Pennsylvania is an aging state, and you're either in Pennsylvania in summer and Florida in the winter or something like that, the joke goes. But anyway, so when you think about that and you think about coming back, new into a state, think about all the things that you as a consumer need to go do. And the most obvious one coming out of the gate is I need to change my vehicle registration and my license. And what we were finding out in Pennsylvania was the Department of Transportation, or AKA PennDOT, was the welcome mat. Do we really want our Department of Transportation being the welcome mat for new residents coming in the state of Pennsylvania? The answer was no. But that's what was happening. And think about all the other things that need to be done as far as finding a place to live. What school district do I put my children in? What school do they go to? Job or economic opportunities for employment. And we haven't even started talking yet about services for my elderly parents that are in need of some assistance. And then who do I engage for long-term living or Department of Aging, whatever it may be in a particular case here, for those types of opportunities. And just, it goes on and on and on. But that was just one use case, right? And then as part of that, we also started digging into what was their social media preference, right? Were they a LinkedIn person? Now we're dating ourselves a little bit. LinkedIn, Facebook. I mean, now we got all kinds of different things out there as well. What brands did they respect? What brands did they admire that they thought they had great experiences in, right? To kind of get that feedback. What did they seem to like? Did they like that AWS type experience or Amazon experience of getting serviced? And then how do we in the state actually provide that? And I kind of use the Domino Pizza analogy, but if I make a request and I file something with state government in North Carolina, can I actually visibly see where I am in the process? Kind of like you can see where your pizza's going through the entire process and coming out the back end and it's in the car for delivery. Do we give that kind of visual display and feedback to residents of the state? And I'm just throwing these things out there as ideas, but there was other things out there about the opioid epidemic. We were talking about, I went transition from blue collar to white collar. Another common one with our higher ed folks here on the line was, I'm graduating college and I'm concerned about job and economic opportunities. Where do I go? And Pennsylvania had a problem keeping the younger generation graduating colleges in the state working. They were going elsewhere. Well, why? That hurts us in many ways. And I just offer those things up as maybe areas, and I don't know if the state auditor's on here, but from maybe her and from her experience in working with all the different entities, maybe there's trends and patterns that might give us some opportunities to take a look at how we might be able to do some things a little bit different to get more value and benefit. Because really, at the end of the day, we're talking about getting more effective and more efficient. And I think everybody wants to do that as public servants here in state government.
So do we want to just get some guidance from the board? What is important to you? What kind of impact you might want to have with this context? Rocco, did you want to kick this off?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. It looked like you had your.
No, actually, so I did want to make a comment to Keith's point on automation. I think automation obviously is going to be a useful aspect of what we're going to do. But in conjunction with that, there has to really be some orchestration, because if we just automate in silos, we're still not really getting the full benefit of the automation or what we could be doing. In effect, we need to be able to look across. We've automated a particular aspect or a part, but what are the dependencies and how do we feed that into the rest of the system? Jim and I's conversation actually started out with, how many times do you want to have to put your name and address in when you're going to interface with the state? You're going to put it in the DMV, but does the tax office get that information? Does the election board get that information? How do we do this so that we automate not just the individual silos, but we orchestrate across the whole gestalt of the organization?
Thank you.
I very much agree. Do it once and that even is a greater result of automation.
And we need to do that when Rock and I were talking in a manner that's, just cognizant and respectful of the additional verifications that may need to take place. So just because I changed my address in DMV, DSH or DHHS here can't necessarily accept that as, there's certain validations or documentation that they require. But instead, what could happen is, in theory, DHHS could send an email to Jim Weaver and saying, we saw you change your address at DMV. Would you like us to make that change in our system? And if so, here's what you need to provide to us. Now, all of a sudden, you are reaching out to me as opposed to me having to react to you. And making it an inconvenience for me to go find time to call the office or do X, Y, Z. And, and the other one I used as an example is maybe a fishing license or a hunting license, but to the point that, hey, Jim, we saw that you hunted or fished in North Carolina last year. Would you like to renew your license? If so, please validate this information is correct. Click OK and give us your credit card number for the license cost of the license payment. All of a sudden now, you probably got me to renew because you reached out to me as opposed to me forgetting to go register or get my license and then I need to go somewhere else and figure out how to do it at the last minute. I don't know if those are appropriate use cases here or not, but those are just some thoughts.
Yeah, Jim, I would say those are absolutely appropriate use cases. So when we do fish and wildlife and registering, you can get a hunting license and a fishing license, or individual, you can sign up for life. But how do we expedite that and make it easy? First thing is, I think we have to recognize this is the point of access that we have to design all systems around. Everybody needs to be able to do anything and interacting with the state through their smartphone. This is the device, particularly the millennials, are going to access us through. So that has to be a foundational component. I think we need to look for high touch, high visibility things. And there's simple things. There's low hanging fruit. One of the efforts that had started kind of behind the scenes, how do we automate all the forms that exist in the state? I mean, literally quit filling out paper. Until 3 years ago, LLCs could not even file tax returns online. So those kinds of things where we have high volume, high use, a lot of manual activity, like Keith was alluding to, are absolute areas that have impact, and you can do those are short projects. The whole forms automation effort that we look at. I think there's things this board, working with your leadership and maybe the CIOs across, is commonality on kind of stated directions for IT across the state. Is things like we're going to go cloud-based versus local servers where appropriate. We're going to make, or rather than making custom build systems, we're going to buy foundational things and stuff off the shelf to use. I mean, there's all those types of things that we can start modeling, I think, that would make a difference. Now, this is one to go a little bit nerd on everybody, and I know it doesn't exist and most organizations don't do it, but I think it's paramount if we're going to quit building Chinese railroads, and that being railroads that meet like this when we get to the middle, is to automate a statewide data model. So we know, because if you're going to do the things where you're one time entering demographics on an individual and it can cross-populate, we need to understand that. And the best way, maybe the only way to do it well, is a tool that would allow us to automate the data model for all information and data elements used across the state. It's just, again, a foundational task that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I don't know if John's on from our GDAC group or not, but I constantly ask John about a master data management model. And how we're kind of, and we're not quite there yet in that kind of context, but I think we have some good foundational stuff that might be underway.
Yeah, and GDAC's another whole conversation because it's not really being leveraged, and we got issues because we're collecting all the population health. So all which this board may or may not be aware of, but through GDAC and legislation, every provider, hospital, and doctor is required to provide clinical information on all of us. It was built as a population health management tool. An interesting component most people won't also recognize, and something we should address, and we have privacy issues, is we're one of the few states that when we take your medical and health data, it now becomes owned by the state, which is an interesting parameter. So what are we going to do and leverage that? There's other things within GDAC, but not a whole lot. Move the HIE to GDAC, but again, not really leveraging it. So
Yeah, and I think that's a phenomenal area there that we have so much more opportunity. So again, it goes back to, I got a ton of ideas. What is it that we need to focus on? What are the one or two things that we can get some immediate traction on, start making some progress? So this group feels like you are making a difference, you're having impact, and we're making things better for the state of North Carolina, because we can't do everything.
One thing to throw out there, and it's in the data transformation, is we have two data centers as well. And do we need to be in that business? I mean, it's an impact. Even GDAC is housed. We don't house it. We house GDAC at SAS.
Yeah. So Jeff, I will take that one from a cloud perspective. I don't know if I necessarily think that needs to be discussed here at this committee, because that goes to our operational model. I mean, please respectfully, don't take that the wrong way. You will see that I'm going to be very much a cloud first type person as we look at application modernization, as we look at the opportunities where we can take advantage of what the cloud offers. But at the end of the day, if we have a bad application, doing a lift and shift to the cloud just means we move the landfill from one place to another. right? It's not giving us the advantages and the benefits. And the analogy I kind of used with Governor Inslee in Washington when I had this conversation was, if you have an 86 Corolla and you put Tesla gadgetry around it, do you have a Tesla or do you still have an 86 Corolla? And so I want to make sure for us to take advantage. And again, as we look into the cloud, again, that's the technology component of it. It's the people and the process. Are our people educated? Do they understand what the cloud brings, what it means, what they can do? What are the processes we have in place to make sure that we're not inadvertently now consuming our entire budget because someone went in there and turned on 15 new, oh, that's a new gadget. I can go do this, this, and this. And all of a sudden, or we forget to turn things off over the weekend, or looking at that discipline, if you will, of how we go about doing things. That pretty soon our operational budget just got shot out the window. And so, I mean, so that's so again, respectfully, I get, yeah, but that's where my head is around that one, Jeff.
So,
Tracy, if I could chime in with just one teeny little point. I love a lot of what I'm hearing here. It's a lot of big vision and direction. I just want to throw out, not quite a wet blanket, but a little caution. I really want to make sure that we recognize what we can do and how quickly we can do, and that we don't fall in that trap of, trying to design a great system that, great enemy of good kind of problem. So I just want to be sure that we set a vision, but then be realistic and practical as we move toward it, and recognize what we can accomplish in time frame.
thanks,
Yeah,
Tracy.
Tracy, fully agree with that.
So we are nearing the end of the time we have for this segment. I just want to pull back. The last question that we have for the board here is, when you look at these 4 proposed committees, and we can just scroll, if we can just zoom back out, looking at cybersecurity, enterprise project oversight enhancement, infrastructure funding, digital transformation. We just want to get some guidance from the board. When you think about what's most important to get started on in the next 30 days, can you give some, just when you look at these 4 that we've just talked about, any guidance, any perspective from the board on this? Want to get a temperature check.
This is where I need all of you to chime in, please.
So this is Rocco here. So, what strikes me first on this is that for me, it feels like that getting our arms around the digital transformation portion really sort of then branches off to the rest of what we're looking at here. I mean, where are we looking to go and what are we looking to do? And as Jim had talked about with the connectivity, the cybersecurity, the privacy, the cloud, I think it really ends up encompassing all of the rest that we have. And so for me, it seems like this would be an appropriate place to start.
I would echo that, Rocco, but I would also urge that we really need to be attentive to what might be the underlying ground conditions in order to even get that digital transformation, and that may relate to certain levels of infrastructure that are not fully in place. And here I go back to the very beginning of where we started, a little bit around identity management and identities, because if we have transformation we're trying to make happen, and if it spans agencies and systems, we need to be sure that our citizenry is referred to in the same way across those. And so again, the issues of identity become foremost.
Yeah. And so there's sort of a dependency on it. Yes.
This is Beth Wood. I would agree with Rocco. Until you decide the digital transformation, you really don't sort of know what other things you might need or what's working and not working. So I think that's where we need to start.
Thanks.
Yeah, one comment to pick up on Tracy on the identity management, that we need to be educated on this history of what's gone on over the last 6 to 8 years. And because we've been transitioning vendors and solutions, and I'm not even sure we're working with state-of-the-art solutions in that area at all. So I think Tracy's spot on. And again, I will go back and kind of support Beth and Rocco in that the digital transformation is, again, the baseline that we have to establish. It'll guide a lot of the other stuff.
Any other feedback on this?
And I will let you all know that my conversations with the governor's office around connectivity and broadband in particular is really focusing on less about last mile, but more about last user. because at the end of the day, we're talking about getting connectivity to the end user. To Jeff's point on these devices, right? Anywhere, any place. We want our, you know, our residents are going to be mobile. You know, we're not going to have. I mean, while we still need to focus on getting connectivity to places of residence and other locations, I don't dispute that, but we need to account for the fact that our kids are using smartphones and tablets probably more so than they are using more traditional devices, and so I'm hopeful to continue to be able to engage the governor's office in that dialogue in a meaningful manner to, as we talk about broadband. And I think, I don't know if Gerald's still on here or not, but some of his conversations around infrastructure and how we move out to more rural areas or municipalities. There are wireless technologies as well that come into play. You know, we got 5G coming, and real 5G, not 4G on steroids, that can start helping on some of these areas as well here in our state. So we need to make sure we're doing device agnostic stuff. Right?
Yeah, and
Just,
Jim,
it's
Jim,
got
to
to be a
support
good
your-
experience on a smartphone. Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, Jim, to support your comment on that, Pew Research had a interesting statistic recently, kind of a fun fact. 93% of all people in the United States that are in 7th grade or older have a smartphone. That's a fascinating, mind-boggling number.
Wow.
But I
12-year-olds
will
and
also
up.
tell you, yeah. So Jeff, I also tell you in the city of Seattle, if you had a household income of below $25,000, you had nothing. No smartphone, no connectivity whatsoever. And that had nothing to do with having accessibility or access to cover, or, you know, from a broadband. I mean, Seattle had, but that's the affordability issue. That's addressing the digital inequity issue. And then we also, maybe to a point, have to look at digital literacy as well. I mean, that's another tenet that, but that's not for today's conversation.
Any other feedback on what you as a board think is important to get started on over the next 30 days? All right, going once.
Okay, sounds like everybody signed up for digital transformation, and here we go.
So let's, 'cause
No.
I know we need, sorry, go ahead. Someone
No,
else.
I was going to say, I'm just joking. So go ahead, please, Warren.
Yeah, no, of course. So let's go ahead and Julie, if you could just talk briefly about next steps for how the committee work would get started.
Hi, thanks everyone. So we have shared these explanations of what committees would look like. Jim is the plan is for him to take all the input from today to recommend committees. It sounds like we've got a pretty clear understanding of where the board's priorities are, and then appoint one or more committees, appoint board members to participate on the committees. So the role of committees is to identify and share best practices, look at problems and deficiencies. That's what the statute says your role as when you have a committee is, and really to more deeply explore and understand the specific topics. Our expectation is that some of you will be appointed to committees and would have an additional meeting in between these full ITSB board meetings. So your time commitment to be on one of those committees would be up to another meeting per month, plus whatever preparation time you need for that. The committees could be ongoing or time limited, depending on the purpose. DIT staff would still be supporting the committee, preparing agendas, minutes, background materials, any presentations needed. And then you might want to bring in technical advisors for some of the discussions. We heard you mention different expertise that you thought would be helpful to hear from different folks. And then FountainWorks will continue to provide support for meeting facilitation and process guidance to make sure that we all stay on track, and you don't need to focus on that aspect of the meetings. You can focus on the big picture strategy that you're on this board for. So the next slide, Connor, just is a visual representation of what would be happening. Jim, as the board chair, would appoint committees, and then you can also have technical advisory groups, although we didn't talk about those today. You would be meeting in between the full board meetings and then report out at the full board meetings. So once we firm up exactly what these committees or single committee is going to be, we'll help craft a charter. You know, what is your purpose? What deliverables the committees are expected to have to make sure that you feel like you can be productive in the committees and that we really make progress as we move forward. So that's just the plan for moving forward on committees. Jim, if you have any clarification on your intent, or board members, if you have any questions about the committees, we'd be happy to take them.
No, the only thing, thanks, Julie. The only thing I would add is if we need to bring in some outside subject matter expertise, I am very sensitive to any appearance of conflicts of interest. So we'll just have to be careful about that. And if we do bring out an outside supplier to kind of maybe educate us on something, that I will make sure that it is not a sales pitch product demonstration. Because we need to learn about certain things. We don't need to learn about products. So again, and I don't think we're going to have that problem. And I don't think our board composition right now is I don't think there's any conflicts of interest as well. But I am sensitive to that. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Jim, also to add, and I guess we could do some homework, or you guys, staff may know, I believe we may subscribe to Gardner's executive resource toolkit, whatever that is, that gives us access to all their great and wonderful knowledge with this. So,
yes. Yeah, so benchmarking, those kind of things, we will have the ability for an analyst on a quarterly basis to probably give us a 2-hour. So these are the kind of things like, as we're moving forward, what are the things that would be very, very beneficial and helpful to all of you? And then, again, some of you in the higher education system, what expertise can you bring from your institutions to maybe help us, as long as there's not a conflict of interest there, to better understand? And I will tell you, I'm all for private-public partnerships. And so if there's any opportunities where we can do some things, maybe even work from a labor or an employment pipelining, how do we start bringing some of the talent that you're generating in your schools? You know, even if they're here for a semester, if they're here for a year, my God, I would love to take advantage of that talent before they move on to bigger and better things within the state, if at all possible. So those are, like I said, there's a ton of things that I could probably continue to rattle off that's top of mind for me. But what, you know, again, going back to what makes the most sense for all of you, where can we start bringing the biggest value, and let's start eating the elephant one bite at a time.
So Jim, if there aren't any other questions, we would be ready to move on to the next agenda item, which is just other business, and then adjourn after that.
Yeah, so as I'm looking here, is there other business? I do not see any, so I also want to be respectful. And you know, I should probably, and Rocco, I'm sorry, but Dr. DeCento is our vice chair. And so I want to make sure everyone was aware of that as well, and acknowledged Rocco here. So I don't know, Dr. DeCento, do you have anything for the good of the cause, sir?
I think we've covered the waterfront at this point, Jim.
Okay. Okay, so I don't believe in having continuing meetings for the sake of having a meeting. So we'll give everybody some time back today. Thank you for all your feedback and comments. Great discussion. Hopefully you'll see the passion and the excitement that I have for some of this stuff. I do want to move forward and get some things done here in the state of North Carolina. We do have an opportunity. The state is in a pretty decent financial status. We can, but we have to make sure we have our ducks in a row, that we know what we're asking for. We have a, return on investment, cost benefit analysis. I'm not going to go and make willy-nilly requests just for the sake of making a request. So we have to have a well thought out plan and process. And then more importantly, the metrics around it to show that we're doing what we said we would do. So again, a fresh start, and hopefully you're seeing that.
Great.
again, I'm counting on all of you to help me as we move forward. And I really sincerely thank you for all the great discussion again today and your support. And please feel free to reach out on things that you might be interested in. I don't like to make unilateral assignments. And I know you all have day jobs as well. So time commitment could be somewhat cumbersome at times. But please, if there's something you're passionate about, let me know. And we will definitely get some things aligned to take advantage of your energy and your passion to drive the state forward. Jonathan, before I say we're adjourned, is there anything from your side, sir, that I need to account for?
Nothing here. I think we're ready to adjourn.
Okay, then with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn for today. And again, thank you, everybody. And I look forward to our continued discussions and participation. And again, feel free to reach out to me, james.weaver@nc.gov. Take care, everybody. Have a great
Thanks,
weekend.
everyone. Bye now.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.